clicker. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining in here to our inaugural Expert in the Room webinar series. A few weeks back, the team here at the Capitol Center decided it was time to get out and engage with our clients and share all the progress we've made in preparing for our opening. That webinar was extremely well received. I think we couldn't have been happier with the results. And from there, we said, well, let's build on the momentum and let's keep it going. So we decided to launch our Expert in the Room webinar series. And this series will each week touch on a topic that's important to you, our clients. We decided to start with the web information technology because that one is regardless of what phase we are or where we are in New York as far as reopening, that's not going to change. And the importance of the IT technology is going to be there regardless. And we realize will play a big part in pretty much every conference or meeting at this point. There will be some sort of virtual component. So IT technology, here we go. Just a couple housekeeping notes before we start. Please be courteous and mute your microphones. We will be engaging in questions, and actually it's encouraged. We limited our registration this time to have a more manageable chat box and encourage questions so that we can get to them all. All questions will be addressed with a follow-up email to all registrants after this webinar. So if we don't get to it live, don't worry, we will follow up with some answers. And then, of course, this is recording and will live on the ACC YouTube channel at the conclusion. With me today, I have James Anilowski of TechForward Inc. TechForward is the IT provider here at the Albany Capitol Center and has been since our pre-opening. And I've worked with James at the Times Union Center, for a good 15, 16 years. We're just discussing that. So to deal with me for 16 years, I think there shows their resiliency and probably, a credit to the way they've been able to change with the times. And no time has probably changed us more than this current pandemic. So, James, I know you are a co-owner of TechForward with Wendy Enright, and you guys are a veteran and women-owned company. Do you want to tell us a little bit about TechForward to get us started, and then we'll go right into it?
Sure. TechForward was kind of a brainchild of Wendy and I about 4 years ago. TechForward kind of evolved into kind of a dual purpose company. We do managed services like for the arenas and such, and then we also do digital signage as a different vertical, and we've have our own intellectual property in that area as well. But we've been in, even though the company TechForward has only been around for about 3-4 years, we have been basically in existence for much longer, as you mentioned, 15, 16 years, under a different entity called DataTech, and it kind of just evolved into TechForward to where we're at now. We have an office actually in the Times Union Center, and we do managed services for companies and large facilities like ACC and the Times Union Center, and we are changing with the times. Things are, the technology is really moving in a different direction now. With where we were switches and hubs for local events, now we're looking at remote access and live streaming and that type of thing. So it's a very interesting field to be in right now, and TechForward's changing with the times.
Yeah. IT in general, and whenever you're making an investment in a piece of equipment, it seems that piece of equipment is outdated before you get home with it in your car. So changing with the times is important. Before we get into the complete IT, I did want to touch a little bit here on and give an update on the facility reopening. As all of our Capital Region viewers know, we are entering phase 4 tomorrow here in the Capital Region. There is a limit on gathering still of 50 people, but the Capitol Center is open, and we are here today in the Capitol Center using our production room that we built, and I'll touch on that a little further. But we are Venue Shield, which I discussed last time, is ASM Global's program for all 325 ASM Global facilities reopening. There are 6 different pillars to the Venue Shield program. Environmental hygiene, probably the most important, was launched. It's a 280-page document for all facilities to use and gear up for their reopening. Then it touches on food service, the customer itself, workforce, obviously just as important as keeping our clients safe. It's our workforce who make the building run, and something that we've been very successful at here for the 3 years of opening. We want to make sure our workforce is safe. Something we're talking about today, technology and equipment, and what not only the technology and equipment that's going to run the events, but also, what do we use in the clean and what products are out there. So another key factor there. And then, of course, public awareness. And how do you, as the event planner, communicate with your attendees that you have a safe facility, that they have confidence in attending a live event again. I think that's probably just an important message, and that'll be a topic of a future Expert in the Room series with the Capitol Center, another partner of the Baker Public Relations, and they're going to help us out with that one, and it's been a huge asset to us during this pandemic. And then the GBAC, they call it GBAC, I guess, the GBAC Star Facilities Accreditation. We are continuing that accreditation. ASM Global is actually working on a partnership with them as the third-party accreditation company to certify. We can come up with our own Venue Shield program, and we could say this is how we do it. But there's certainly value in the third party, and a reinforcement of what you're doing is correct, or at least on the right path. I mentioned that we are in the webinar production room here, and I put in a couple photos. The backdrop here behind us, and you can see that in the first photo, that is created by Tech Forward. So it's a nice way to change your message. We can change it, update it. Not producing banners, again, a digital world technology. And then we had some photos from our inaugural webinar series when we were reopening, and you can see that we have room for panelists, social distance apart. We have a moderator, confidence screen. So each station has a camera, a microphone, and a laptop all spread out. We have redundancy factors built in. The high-speed internet, and something James will talk about a little bit later at the Capitol Center, is top-notch, exceeds all needs for the facility and for conducive to doing such streaming. You don't have to worry about us freezing. That was me freezing, not the internet. So we have all those capabilities there, and probably most important, especially for me, is the on-site technology, or excuse me, on-site technical support, because other than Control-Alt-Delete, my IT knowledge is limited at best. And then also Mazzone Hospitality has created our grab and grow menus, again, prepackaged, whether it's a box breakfast, something new, could be a box lunch. You have the capability of ordering lunch for your staff to come in here and do your whole presentation. So with that, James, let's get into the internet and the IT technologies. I think as we go through this, I put in some questions and would love to see, the chat room fill up their questions too. But our first slide here talks about, basic questions. What should the meeting planner ask, the IT professional when they're preparing their webinar? There hasn't been a large presence in the streaming. I think everybody has, over the last 3 months since March, become accustomed to Zoom. And whether it's Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatever it is, there's some questions that the IT professional who's going to deliver the product needs to know. So we start with, how many people? Why is that important? What's the thought process, and why do we need to know the people?
Well, the more people that use, a streaming service or a network, the more bandwidth you need. And And bandwidth is the key, is to size your bandwidth appropriately. If you have a lot of people and just a small pipe, so to speak, you're it may appear to work at times, but then it may get choppy, as you were alluding to earlier, that if things start to hit all at once, you may get a stutter, or it may become not intelligible. And so having the appropriate amount of bandwidth and sizing the bandwidth appropriately to how many people you have or how many users you may have is very, very important. And while a lot of companies can use people at home and do Zoom conferences or that type of a thing, what you have to understand is that when you buy bandwidth at your house, and you say, well, I only have one person at my house using it, and then I know one of my other coworkers is going to do it from their house, and et cetera. Everybody's bandwidth is going to be different depending on where they are geographically, what kind of service they have, whether it be cable TV, cable, Time Warner cable, or whatever it is, Spectrum. Some people have FiOS. It's just when you try to do a large event, whether it be a big Zoom meeting or you want to do a kind of a virtual conference, coming to a facility like this, especially if you have a large number of people, has many, many advantages. And so one of the biggest ones is, of course, that we have dedicated bandwidth. Unlike the kind of bandwidth that you may get at your house, you may say, well, I have 100 megabits of bandwidth at my house. Well, that's not dedicated most of the time. I don't know any consumer grade connection that is not shared. So now there may be some, but typically people have cable modems, and they're not guaranteed to give you that bandwidth at all times. When you come to a facility like this, if we know how many people you're going to have here at the facility, we can dedicate a certain amount of bandwidth, and it is guaranteed to be up and running, and it is dedicated to just you, and it's not shared, and you can use all of it or none of it, and it won't affect the next person. So how many people we're going to have at an event is very important to know.
And so when we take the people, then we need to know what those folks are doing, right?
That's right. So if you're going to have 500 people in an event here, and they're just going to be checking emails and that type of thing, or surfing the web casually, you may only need a couple hundred megs or 500 megs of bandwidth or less. But if you're going to be doing streaming, or you're going to be downloading large amounts of data, or if you have a dedicated application that requires some type of a bandwidth dedication, you're going to want a facility like this that can segregate the traffic and guarantee that it's going to work. I mean, it's the difference between, and that's a hard concept for some people, because when things work right at home, or when things work right without that dedicated or service level agreement, it seems like, well, why should we consider anything else? But think about this. Think about how many times you've been on a Zoom call, or think about, how many times you've been watching a streaming video on your laptop and it suddenly stutters or nowadays people just kind of think, oh, well, that's just the internet. That shouldn't happen here, because we have, again, we don't share the bandwidth. We just don't say everybody's got 100 meg. We say, this is how much you have, this is how much you have, and we guarantee it. So your experience will be better.
Right. So you threw out some, threw out meg. We have a gig. There's megabytes per second. There's mega gigs per second. There's gigs. So
right.
What's at the Capitol Center, we offer our free Wi-Fi all the time. It's up. It's public. No client has to pay for it. It's 50 Mbps, megabytes per second.
Megabits per second. Small b.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Small b versus a big B. When you do megabits per second, which is what internet connectivity is typically measured at.
Right.
When you do megabytes per second, that's typically a storage capacity number, like my hard drive is X amount of megabytes storage. But when you're talking about connectivity and streaming, it's megabits per second, which is a factor of 8 less than megabytes.
Right. So free Wi-Fi, Capitol Center, megabits,
mm-hmm.
small b, as you say.
Right.
What's the use? There's a 500 group in here, 500 people group.
Mhm.
They need to check their emails,
Mhm.
maybe do a little surfing on the net. Nothing, no special apps or
Mhm.
anything. Megabits, 50 of them. Is that enough?
50, 100, 100, yeah. If it's casual use, if it's just checking emails and browsing the web, 50 to 100.
Okay.
50 to 100 is plenty.
So now we start going into the world of our virtual events and what brings us here today, right? We're into the webinars and we're streaming now.
Right.
What do we need? If we want to go Facebook Live, Twitter Live, YouTube Live, if we're on Twitch, if we're on Zoom, we're on Microsoft Teams. I mean, there's a million options, all supported by the ACC. Right. By the way, you do have capabilities of streaming on all of them if you wish when you're here, and we will adapt to the programs to your preference. Yeah. But so what do you need there, and what can we offer on our reliability there?
Well, when we talk about Twitch, when we talk about Facebook and all these other streaming, we call those platforms. So we create a stream here with or a business that comes in that wants to do their own may hire a company such as Aces or another company that would provide the streaming equipment, and then you can pick the platforms that you want to stream to. We have 1,000 megabits of dedicated bandwidth here, 1,000 megabits. And we have a backup line of another 1,000 megabits. And we have the capacity to bring in more if we have some type of huge event that requires even more than that. And we have done that at other facilities, for example, to manage gaming, events and stuff like that, where you have, use huge amounts of bandwidth. We have the capacity to scale up to any event right now. We have not seen an event that we can't get enough bandwidth for. And regardless of the number of platforms that you're streaming to, whether it be Facebook, YouTube, or whatever, we have enough bandwidth to accommodate that here, and dedicated bandwidth, so that, in the middle of a stream, you're streaming to Facebook. Facebook is not going to it's not going to be the one that freezes or whatever. It's usually the stream between the facility and Facebook. And what I'm saying is that with 1,000 megabits here of dedicated bandwidth, we can guarantee that the streams, you want 20 people streaming at the same time to various platforms, we can accommodate that.
And so that was it. So, we're 52,000 square feet, 5 meeting rooms, Capitol room. We have the multi-purpose room upstairs. If we have 3 different clients doing 3 different things and all of them want to stream, we can accommodate that. We could dedicate their bandwidth, right? So that's not a concern.
That's correct. They're not sharing. So you're absolutely right. It's like 3 different facilities with their own dedicated cable right to YouTube, Facebook, or whatnot. Mm-hmm. Also, and to further, and I don't know, I think we're going to jump ahead into security, but it might be a good chance to just say that if we do have 3 different events going on at the same time with 3 different sets of connectivity, we have a very sophisticated switching platform or back end or whatever you want to call it. Our switching fabric is very sophisticated, and we segregate the traffic so that there's no possible way that one event would absolutely or by any way get into the bandwidth or the network of another event. So you're completely separate, like I said, like almost like having 3 different physical facilities.
Right. And so even to take that a step further, if we have 3 different facilities or 3 different groups in
virtual
here using
facilities,
virtual facilities, we'll call them, and we need, my boss is coming in and we need to make sure that his signal is strong the whole day because he's got other things going on and is working around. We could dedicate to an individual with its own separate I'll call it a network. You tell me what it is.
Well, we can give identify down to what they call an IP address, whoever is on our network. We do have special what they call VLANs, and I don't want to get too technical here, but they're virtual local area networks. So we can create a virtual network that only your boss can connect to, and give that virtual network its own specific dedicated bandwidth. So you have 3 entities going on at the same time here, and there's streaming and there's lots going on. And your boss says, well, I understand you have a lot going on right now, but when I get into the room, I want to be able to get onto the internet. I have to be able to do that. It's guaranteed. It's guaranteed.
We have a question here from Vanessa. So it says here, is the up and down speed symmetrical?
It's the same.
It's the same.
Yeah, it's the same up and the same down. It is
Yes.
1 gig up and 1 gig down. So, yeah. So is the backup, or yeah?
Because there is. So if you're downloading something, it requires the speed, and then if
That's
you're
right. We have
streaming out, it's the same speed. Is that
That's
correct?
Well, what it means basically is that if we have 1 gig going up
Mhm.
and we have 1 gig going down, and it can happen at the same time.
Gotcha.
So we have a full 1 gig coming down, a full 1 gig going up, and it can happen all at the same time. So basically, two in a weird way, 2 gigs,
Right.
right? 1 up and 1 down.
And we are, mentioned this before. So we, our sister facility, the Times Union Center next door, they have the same network. When I say same network, same equipment. So that offers us redundancy. We work with First Light Fiber, who is our provider, and we have 2 different networks coming into the facility. So if the Capitol Center's network or connectivity with First Light fails, we have the redundancy with the Times Union Center to pull a gig from the Times Union Center, and vice versa. So I'll use the word symmetry between the 2 facilities to keep us from a complete failure.
And we go beyond that. We go to what they call an enterprise multi-homed connectivity model.
Well, that rolls off your tongue.
Doesn't it? Isn't that a catchy phrase? I should get a T-shirt made. What it means is basically that not only do we have all this great bandwidth with First Light and stuff, but we also have the capacity to have a backup line from other ISPs as well, internet service providers. So, and their equipment and their lines physically come from different facilities. So while and this happens, during an event, there could be a car crash that takes out a telephone pole that might have a line that comes to this facility. We have the capacity to actually have 2 lines coming into this facility from totally different directions, so that if there is a crash on a telephone pole goes down, it automatically switches to another line that keeps our facility up and running. And that's huge. I mean, that's really, really enterprise level stuff.
So we're talking about a gig and how fast that is and how much bandwidth there is. So last year in March, we held the HV Gamer Con. That was our inaugural e-gaming. We had 3 stages with 5 supercomputers really for e-gaming.
That's right.
What you need. Going on simultaneously, not a hitch. We had the 2,500 folks in the facility, all on their phones, and whether they're practicing or communicating with one another. And if I remember correctly, we didn't even have a blip near a gig of usage for that facility.
We didn't have to. That's right. So a gig isn't of bandwidth is an awful lot of bandwidth. It really is. And not only that, and I want to talk a little bit about, and it's a great point, but I want to talk a little bit about latency too. So this will appeal to some of the event planners that might be considering doing gaming conventions and real high-tech stuff. Our latency, which means the delay in which when I send a packet over the internet or a request over the internet and how quickly it comes back to me, is a function of how robust our connection is between here and the internet, and that's our ISP First Light. We have fiber optic cables, and we have some of the lowest latency. So gamers are very in tune to latency. When they're gaming in real time on their computer, when they click the fire button, how long does it take? What's the latency? And it's in milliseconds. So it could be 3 milliseconds, 2 milliseconds, 1 millisecond. Those milliseconds, when you're a gamer or and you're competing, can make a difference in whether you win or lose a game. When you're playing from home and you got great bandwidth, your latency may not be that great. You still might have a 5 millisecond latency or a 3 millisecond latency because your signal, even though you get a lot of bandwidth, has to go through your neighborhood and go into a switching station and go to the cable company and then go out of satellite or whatever it has to do. Our bandwidth here is basically hardwired through fiber optic cables right to a switching station. So our latency is as close to zero as it can be. So if you want to do something that has the best performance in that area, this is the place to come.
You touched on it a little bit, and it was the security for the event. And we have here numerous events. So if we have a social event who's using a bidding app, and there's credit card numbers, and we have Zone Hospitalities running machines and for credit cards for concessions, or if there's a cash bar. You have that now. The future, looking at conferences and online registration, so that you have touchless and folks aren't filling out paper and handing them in and passing paperwork and all of that. So the security, firewalls is what's our security levels here? How do we again ensure confidence? And this isn't confidence that's kind of my buzzword during this opening. It's our confidence in doing business again. So how do we instill that confidence in the user of our service?
Well, I'll get a little bit detailed here, and I hope I don't put anybody to sleep. But let me just start by saying when I discussed about having that scenario where it's 3 virtual facilities in one, our networks, our cabling goes into switches that have basically what amounts to firewalls between each silo. It's a situation where even if I'm in the same room, if that jack over there is on a different virtual network than that jack over there, you can't see each other through the computer. You can't you can't communicate between those 2 computers. They're in effect in 2 separate places. That's one huge part about our security here. They're called virtual local area networks, VLANs. The second thing is that, and more of a concern, is when you go to a facility and you do and you connect wirelessly, right? Because wireless is so ubiquitous at Starbucks, at hotels, or wherever you go. You don't know, based on those facilities that you're at, if I'm on the same wireless network as you are, can I get into your phone maybe if I do a search, or if I'm smart, I'm one of these people that has nefarious views. Here at the Albany Capitol Center, we and this is getting into the nitty-gritty just a little bit, we have wireless separation. And it's a protocol that the governing body of wireless, IEEE, suggests that you use in a public place, in which even if we're connected to the same wireless network and we're on the same virtual local area network, I still can't get into your phone because our equipment recognizes that you're connected to the wireless antenna access point. I'm connected to the same one, and I'm not going to let those 2 people talk to each other. They can go out to the internet independently, but they're not going to talk to each other. So we go over and beyond what you would normally get. You don't normally get wireless separation at home. If somebody's on your wireless access point at home and one of your kids is on it, they can probably see each other, your computers on there, and you can give each other viruses and that type of a thing. That's not the case here. When you're on wireless, you're your own silo right to the internet.
And I think one thing we have a lot of focus here on the Capitol Center and obviously our technologies. But I think these are all important topics that, our clients need to know regardless of the facility. We need our clients to be successful in hosting events again. As much as we'd love for them to be here at the Capitol Center, it's just important for this economy to get restarted and, in our meeting facilities to be. So if you're here at the Capitol Complex and you're going up to the Empire State Plaza, you're going down to the Times Union Center, these are all questions and stuff that I think are important to ask. So if you do have a question that isn't specific to the Capitol Center, feel free to ask it. Our expert in the room, James, will do so.
I'll do my best to answer.
Speaking of experts, Shannon Lasiewicz sent a question in, Director of Sales and certainly an expert at sales here at the facility. At what point does the speed or bandwidth matter? Is it, 20 folks who are just doing a PowerPoint and just streaming and there's no interaction? Is it, what is the cap, or what would you say is it important to take note and say, when they ask that question, what will your folks be doing and how much speed do I need? What is that threshold? Where does that number come from?
I know, and I know that this question is going to come up. It comes up all the time, right?
I don't know what I need.
And the
This is
reason
what I'm
why
doing.
there's not a simple chart that we can put on a wall that says if you're doing video conferencing, you need X amount of bandwidth, is because it's so unique. Every situation, even an upstream, you could be using the same software and the same hardware equipment to stream an event to Facebook. Are you streaming it in stereo? Is it mono? What is the sample rate of your audio? What's the resolution of your video? There's just so many variables that would determine what kind of bandwidth you need. You can't really put all those variables in a spreadsheet and just say, well, and ask a million questions like, what kind of equipment are you using? What's the resolution of your stream? How many people are going to be streaming simultaneously? It would be a daunting task, and it would probably be fruitless, because at the end of the day, you just have to kind of turn it on and see what kind of bandwidth you use. Now, that being said, it's not complete shot in the dark. We do have an idea of what what other events have used in the past, and we track that stuff. So I can give you a general idea, but it's by no means a set formula for whatever you're going to do. So if I can tell you that if you have a couple of hundred people that are just doing casual web surfing, email checking, that you could get away with 100 megabits or less. But if you're going to be doing streaming, we need to know more about what kind of stream you're going to be doing. But I can tell you that two general rules: the more the better. The more bandwidth you get, the better chances that you're going to be successful. And B, we can give you whatever you need to be successful. So if you come in and you say, well, I'm going to be doing live streaming, I'm going to have an auction where people are going to be coming to our website and using a bidding app and that type of a thing, we will suggest to you, I think you should get 300 megs for your event. And if it turns out that isn't what we suggested isn't appropriate for you, we can actually bump that up in real time too, and we can monitor that as well.
So how do I, I'm the client, and I say, I get 50 Mbps here at the Capitol Center. How do I know that's what I'm getting? How do I test that speed? As a client, I want to be sure I'm getting what I'm paying for.
Sure, that's actually pretty simple. We do speedtest.net. Actually, is what we do. It's an app that you can put on your phone or on your laptop. You can just go to the webpage, speedtest.net, and it's been around for a while now, and it really works. It's pretty accurate based on what we've been using. We've been using it for years.
So we skipped over this. It was on the previous slide, and you jumped ahead to security, and we started talking about security. But in talking about speed and bandwidth and usage, does the hardware matter? Does the hardware play a factor into what is absorbing the bandwidth, or is it strictly the software? Or
I wouldn't say that the hardware affects the bandwidth as much as it would be the reliability. When clients come in with their own equipment and say, well, this worked on our network, we tested it before we came here, so we didn't give ourselves much time, we just wanted to set it up a half hour ahead of time, and for some reason it seems to be slower here, and I don't know what the problem is. It turns out it's typically a configuration issue on their hardware, because again, we have this dedicated bandwidth here, and typically it's usually a misconfiguration with the hardware, and we can work through that. But what I would suggest is that if you're going to be using an application as part of your event, whether it be checking attendance or face recognition for your attendance, or making badges, or whatever it might be for your event, that you make sure that you communicate that to us in advance, and that you give yourselves enough time in advance so that someone from our team can meet with somebody from your team to set it up in advance to make sure that's tested. while we don't know every system that you could possibly be bringing into our facility, we have seen an awful lot over the years. So we could probably tell you, and most likely, if it's not working the way it should, why it's not working the way it should. We can help you fix, basically configure your equipment for optimal use.
Um, my question, um, can we, do we have the capability to dial down to a device? If we have a Wi-Fi network for the group, the conference, and they log in and they're using it, and like, well, this is performing really slow. This shouldn't be doing that. There's only 50 people here, and then can we dial up and say, oh well, there's a device on here that's
Consuming.
streaming or is watching Netflix, and they're sucking up your bandwidth. Do we have that capability?
We do. We do. We don't use it very often. And the reason why we don't need to use that very often is because we can set limits as to how much you could use. In the old days, it used to be that when two people would come with a laptop, somebody would start streaming a movie on their laptop, and the second person is trying to get to a website, and it's just taking forever. It's because the first person on was the first person that gets all the bandwidth. Nowadays, with our advanced equipment now, we can do what we call traffic shaping. So what that means is that I know that you're streaming a movie, but I'm gonna kind of cap you so that you don't take up all the bandwidth for everybody else. And it's a moving cap too. So and we can totally configure that. We can say no caps, or we can say everybody gets 50 megs. We can say we have the capacity to do some advanced traffic shaping, and also if there's some applications that you may not want at your event. Let's say you say, well, I know we're paying for all this awesome bandwidth, but I also know that one of our people, when they come in, they love to do peer-to-peer, and they download movies and games, and they shouldn't be doing that. We have the capacity to, or the capability, I'm sorry, to identify that and actually shut it down. I mean, we have some very advanced capabilities here. Yeah, to guarantee that you're going to work properly.
If we have, so what if someone wants to come in and set up their own network? They want a hard line, plug into their own router, wireless router,
Mhm.
and run their own network within the facility.
Mhm.
Do they conflict? Is there an issue with that? Or if there's a company that is confident in their own equipment, can we
That
do
actually
that?
happens more often than you think. And the reason that happens more often than you think is because, unlike our equipment here, some facilities you go to are horrible. I mean, I once toured with the WWE in earlier years.
As a wrestler or an IT?
Not as a wrestler. I know you might find that hard to believe, but not as a wrestler, as an IT guy. And I've gone to many facilities, and some of the facilities that we went to, I couldn't believe how poor the networks were at that time. So some of the shows or events say we don't, because we go to multiple facilities, we want to have our own equipment. Because we have confidence in that. So we can definitely accommodate that, and we do often do that. People bring in a router, and they'll upstream basically to our network as if our network is the internet. And to that point, our guest network and our network in general is not filtered. So if you're worried about, a lot of people say, well, we do some advanced stuff with voice over IP telephones, and I want to make sure that your network doesn't filter out, those packets, because a lot of places do. You should consider when you come here that our network is like a direct link to the internet. We won't filter it unless you have a specific request saying, I don't want anybody, watching streaming videos while we're here at this event, because they're, we're supposed to be listening to our chairman talk about boring stuff. So, so we have those capabilities, but you should come here with your router if you want to, with the idea that you're plugging directly into the internet, and you can do all the firewall stuff you want, or create your own network if you want.
Hard line versus Wi-Fi.
Okay.
If I need a hard line, obviously it's restricted to that one device. Wi-Fi is, open multiple people on the access point. What's, for a meeting planner, can I get by with a Wi-Fi connection and call it a day? Or is this, and maybe this is more for our trade show portion where you have multiple booths, right? We have a room full of 100 booths. Some request a hard line, some request Wi-Fi. What's the advantage or disadvantage? Is there one?
Not anymore. Not as much anymore. I was the former deputy director of networks for the New York City Department of Education. While down there in New York City, we designed a wireless network for the school system down there. And as much as I loved putting wireless in 500 schools down in New York City, and I was a big advocate of wireless because it opens up so much more flexibility in what you can do. I was always the first person to say, if you have a choice between plugging into the wall or using a wireless signal, always plug into the wall. Only use wireless if you can't feasibly plug into the wall because it's more reliable. That's a general rule of thumb outside of this facility. But within this facility, I can count the number of access points we have in a row here. There's no way that any one of these access points is going to be saturated to the point where you're going to lose a signal. So I don't see much of an advantage anymore while at this facility between wireless and wired, including streaming. We could stream very reliably over this wireless network. But a lot of people still feel that plugging in is the best option, and I support that. So if they want to plug in, we can plug in multiple computers on the same virtual network if we want to, just like as if they were wireless.
Gotcha. We had a question from the group about chargers and
About what?
Chargers. What does the Capitol Center? I'll take this one.
Yeah, why don't you take that one? Because yeah.
So yeah, at the Capitol Center, we have our 50 MB lower BPS that's complementary, and then based on your needs and your conversations with James, we decide if the 50 does work, or do we need to increase that bandwidth. So and a lot of that pricing goes based on what you just talked about. Is it how many people are there, and does it become a price per person, or is it just a full network and it's a different price? I will say, and Shannon will clap, and Amelia maybe or not, but based on these needs and the way these webinars are going, and I see here our base free, quote unquote, free package of 50 will be increased, much similar to the way we are offering complimentary space to accommodate meetings for social distance without charge. So if you have 200 people and you need to social distance those 200 people, we're not going to charge for the extra square footage for social distancing. I think, it only makes sense at this point to increase the available bandwidth to accommodate a virtual component, because it's the same thing. You're still bringing more people in, and you're still doing, what we all love to do, and that's meet. So I think that's important to do. So while there are charges, much like the way everybody has done business, that's changing, and that's definitely a point that is been discussed, and probably moving forward will be something that we need to do in order to again instill the confidence that we're here to do business and have people within the facility. Another question: how does someone Zoom bomb? Or we've seen there's Zoom meetings, and all of a sudden somebody else has control of the chat room, or somebody else pops into this meeting, and then we have this webinar which is secure. And how does that happen? And what?
Oh, here's one of those situations where if you're a computer
Zoom
person or you're a networking expert, that you know everything about Zoom or whatever the case may be. I'm not a Zoom expert by any stretch of the imagination. I have heard reports that Zoom may not be as secure a platform as some other streaming platforms, only because, and this is again just third-party information that I've read about, is that some people can leave the channel open and other people can jump onto it, or inherently when you're doing these types of applications, there's there's going to be
Risk.
issues. Yeah, there's going to be issues. But I think as well as if it's well moderated and for example, in a Zoom meeting, it's kind of an ad hoc. It's an ad hoc. Everybody kind of just jumps in together as
Unless it's password protected. If you password protect it, then
Of course,
obviously you
which
have a level of security.
you have a little, which obviously you want to do. I would suggest strongly
All the
about
time.
that. But it is also a kind of everybody just jumps in together, and there's nobody really managing the technology. It's just everybody logs in and starts using it. Here, for example, we do have people like ACES and other experts that will monitor the the applications and make sure that there's no problem. So yeah, there's not much I can add to that. I mean, all the information's out there on Google if you want to look it up.
So
But
maybe a Zoom expert will be the next
a Zoom
in the room
expert,
topic.
right? The next expert in the room might be a Zoom expert, but yeah, I've heard that Microsoft Teams or some of the Cisco apps are a little bit more secure, but that's all I know about that.
I wanted to point out today that I have opted for a polo shirt today. Our last Zoom meeting, I wore a white collared shirt with a suit jacket and got a flat tire on my way to the Capitol Center. I had to change my tire in the suit jacket and shirt, so I just wanted to avoid those good, the inevitables. What will go wrong can go wrong. So I just wanted to point out that's why I'm wearing it.
Okay.
Our expert in the room, we have our next series is with Michael Hoffman, and we're going to discuss hotels. Michael, a highly respected individual in the hotel world, member of the ACCA board, member of Discover Albany, obviously entrenched into the meeting world, and has been for quite some time. So we're really looking forward to those discussions. They're going to be next week. We will do these every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Following Michael will be Sean Wilcoxon from the Zone Hospitality, and that'll be on the 14th. I can't believe that we're into July already. Again, a great thank you to all of our partners, Albany Convention Center Authority, Tech Forward, ACES, Baker PR, and Discover Albany. We are always trying to engage with our clients. The Capitol Center, we're here to do business, and there's nothing more we love to do is to bring people together. So, thank you again all for joining us. Please have a safe and healthy holiday weekend. And once again, it is nothing more. We're looking forward to meeting you again. So thanks all for joining in, and we'll see you next time.
Take care. Thank you.